Welcome back to Africa This Morning. We'll take a look at the leading stories here on Media Watch in the dailies here in Kenya. We'll start off with the Standard. Raila battles suspicions days to party elections, which are supposed to be conducted on February the 28th. And here we have a hopeful image of those who are in the ODM camp. Agnes Zani and Ababu Namwamba, the ODM candidates for the post of Secretary General, hug as a sign of reconciliation after the party's meeting at Orange House. That was yesterday. That was a story that was covered here on Ebru Africa. You can catch that on our YouTube page and on our Facebook page also to get updates on this particular story. But if you need an elaborate version of the story, you can catch it on page 2 of the Standard. At the very top of the page, from Hague, ICC told how ethnicity and impunity led to poll violence. That's expanded further on page 5. After Machakos, Bomet County Audit Report also out. That's on page 8. You need to catch up with the audit of the counties and how public funds are being utilized. That's elaborated exclusively by the Standard on page 8. Kenya's soils, the heavy price Kenyan farmers pay due to fertilizer misuse. That's on page 6. We'll elaborate further when you get to that page. Still on the bottom part of the top page of the Standard, fresh storm in Uhuru's party over the cash. This is touching on the allocation of cash by the Political Parties Act, and we're touching on 89 million, which was allotted to TNA. I'll pull a little bit from this particular article. A fresh storm has erupted in President Uhuru Kenyatta's TNA as factions, as a faction out to topple the party's leaders schemes to block officials from accessing party funds. There's an elaborate version of this particular story on page 2. From the top page to page 3, excitement over KQ's low-cost carrier plan. And this is just touching on in-flights that are going to be available for the city of Kisumu, for the city of Mombasa, and for the Eldoret town. And pulling from this article so that we get to know what exactly the KQ business in-flight company is doing. KQ one-way flights from Nairobi to Kisumu, Mombasa, I beg your pardon, and Eldoret will cost 3,000, down from 7,650 when you took a flight from Nairobi to Eldoret, and down from 7,055 shillings when you took a flight from Nairobi to Kisumu. You can read the comprehensive version of this story on page 3 of the Standard. And for those of us who come from very far, I think this is just going to work to boost trips back home, and it will be a positive move to ensure that those who are within the cities are able to navigate easier and safely using the KQ in-flight options for the country residents. Still on page 3, Hue and haw no more. First donkey abattoir in Africa set to open doors in Naivasha. Kenyans have been huffing and puffing, wailing and mourning every time donkey remains are freshly cleaned of their flesh by unscrupulous butchers are found dumped in open fields or by the roadsides. My question is, in this particular situation, the abattoir has been established and is soon to be open. Yes, the market is in China, but the fact that there were discussions that were behind the scenes, even when donkey meat was illegal, brings to question the fact that money comes before, I don't know whether to use the word morality, but morality comes into mind at this point. I'll pull a little bit from this article. The trader said that he is in the process of acquiring legal papers. In the process is the effective phrase right there. In the process of acquiring legal papers and certification from the government. This is to ensure that the abattoir is actually legalized. The slaughterhouse is expected to open many job opportunities. Njonjo revealed that Njonjo is the owner of the abattoir. Njonjo revealed that once the abattoir is completed, there will be as many as 30 vacancies, while scores others will be employed by the slaughterhouse indirectly. Of course, Njonjo is indicating that the market for his donkey meat will be in China. And here we had him show the abattoir, the probable commercial abattoir to some of the Chinese investors and government officials. That's something you'd need to get a comprehensive perspective on page 3 of the Standard. From page 3, we move to page 6. Studies show acidic soils affecting food production countrywide. Of course, we touched on this here on Table Talk when you invited Mr. Kenei, who is an agricultural expert, and he indicated that we need to change how we fertilize our soils. And yesterday, the president had launched results of 10,000 soil samples from 44 counties in a presentation that he made in Nakuru County. And we'll pull a little bit from this particular article. Finding of the research: the most limiting nutrients in production of maize in all districts were those required in large amounts, namely nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. Of the soil sampled, that was yesterday, the soil samples that were released, 67% sorry, I beg your pardon, were low in micronutrients, zinc, and 89% in organic matter. You can read a comprehensive version of this story and get to know what the president is taking up to ensure that our soil is actually back to its most productive and most natural state. Uhuru orders fertilizer prices lowered. That's on the column part of page 6 of the Standard. Moving on from page 6 to page 14, there's a lot more that you can catch on current affairs and get yourself informed. We'll touch on the illustration of page 14. Here is a very interesting illustration of, I think this is Uganda, and Kenya is peeping from the side right there, represented by the president and the deputy president. That sounds familiar. And here we have our Ugandan neighbor indicating that there's an anti-gay law bill that he's supposed to sign. And here we have the international leader of the powerhouse, the United States. Choices have consequences. Of course, he's advising the Ugandan country not to sign the anti-gay bill, but get your thoughts on that from this particular illustration and also in other articles here in the Standard. On the column part, time to get serious about land reform. Use report on quality of soil to boost food production. That's on the top part of page 14. From page 14, we go to the back page. There's a lot more on the editorial that you can catch here on the Standard. Get a copy and get yourself informed. Here we have an illustration, an image of Kenya's Vivian Jeb Kenei, Cherotich, and Ethiopians Dibaba compete in the women's 10,000-meter final in the Olympic Stadium at the 2012 Summer Olympics in London. Why did we why we did poorly in London? Of course, this is an elaborate story to explain why we did not perform very well in the London Olympics, but that's something that you need to catch and expound your information on page 51 of the Standard. On the back page still, we have other headlining sports stories. Arsenal need perfection against Bayern Munich. That's expanded further on page 49. Tuzo stops Kenya shillings 30 million sponsorship to KPL side Gor Mahia. That's unfortunate, but then you can get the full story on page 51. Moving on from the Standard to the Daily Nation. Coast leaders' victory in fight for ODM job. Of course, this is just touching on the Secretary General's position, and that's it was a no-brainer in a sense. When you think of politics, you'd need to garner the support of the coast, but then that's something you need to get the perspective of the Daily Nation in relation to this particular story on page 6. On the top part of the Daily Nation, 5 MPs launch war on homosexuality. Legislators vow to rally colleagues to push for enforcement of laws against gays on page 3. We touch on the image right here of Mombasa County traders. Reprieve for Mombasa traders as court orders them to be given space. That's a positive move, but then you need to get to know where the devil is in the detail. You can get the full story on page 22 of the Daily Nation. MPs to probe police raid on Masjid Musa Mosque. That's expanded further on page 2. There's a lot more on economy that's touched on there. Food security, TSC to promote 3,400 teachers. Moving on from the top page to page 12 of the Daily Nation. Here we are touching on an illustration of the ICC, and we have our AG right there with a bubble quote saying, "Look, this is Africa, let's face it. Do you expect me to help you nail a man who has given me the job?" Of course, that's self-explanatory. You can get your thoughts on that and read a little bit more on the editorial segment of the Daily Nation. MP's anti-gay caucus stoking intolerance. That's the perspective of the Daily Nation on that particular issue. Read that and get yourself updated on that. Fallacy of fee guidelines. That's something on the education sector, but it's an editorial piece by the Nation again. Committee to probe bank rates, a wise move. now demystify its operations. You can get yourself informed on what's happening with your banking institutions, the financial institutions, and the rates that are put when it comes to loans and also services provided by the financial institutions. Moving on from page 12 to page 18 of the Daily Nation, there's a lot more that you can catch on the counties, on education, and on current affairs here on the Daily Nation. On page 18, we have an art story, Nairobi accused of hijacking return of Mijikenda artifacts. That's an art story there. Kilifi officials say city-county team has no business repatriating items from the U.S. Museum. Of course, there's a lot of our African artifacts and a lot of our African cultural attributes that are spread out, both in Europe and in the United States and also in South America, and we need to reel them in. But at the same time, this is a story that is giving you an example of the stand that has been made by the Denver Museum, claimed that it received 30 statues in 1990 as a donation from two Hollywood collectors. That was Gene Hackman and film producer Art Linson. Of course, when they collect, I think that's part of a business transaction, but that's something that is part of our identity. You need to read this and get yourself informed on that. Still on this county column of the Daily Nation, filthy officers told to tidy up or shut down. That's in relation to Nakuru County. Public institutions have been issued with a 30-day notice to clean up their offices or get closed. That's something you need to read on and get yourself informed. It's surprising that Nakuru County was mentioned to be one of the cleanest towns in the country, but now it's dilapidated to this point. They actually have to get a notice to clean up. Still on the column part of the county page, the first county page, Elgeyo Marakwet Speaker accuses critics of spoiling his name. That's something in relation to his identity and defamation and libel, possibly, but you need to read this part to get yourself informed. Makueni, irrigation weapon to fight chronic hunger. That's a positive story. On the very bottom page of the column, the beginning column part of the county story, Akaranga lays bare county projects and spending. That's a positive move on transparency in relation to public funds by Akaranga. That's in Vihiga. Moving on from page 18 to the back page of the Daily Nation, fertilizer prices cut to boost farming. This is a beautiful image of our president right here. President Kenyatta launches the national soil test results at Egerton University, as I had mentioned to you earlier, in Joy, Nakuru County yesterday. With him, the deputy president left, and Agriculture Cabinet Secretary Felix Koskei. That's at the center, and this is a very positive move to ensure that we actually understand what's happening to our soils and what is causing us to experience the drought episodes in the country. We cannot be experiencing drought and not finding out what the solutions are. And just touching on the data insert on this particular story, 143,000 tons of subsidized fertilizer, which the government has purchased at the cost of 72 billion, will be provided to farmers. You can read more on this. And still on the back page of the Daily Nation, Wenger confident Gunners will beat Bayern Munich. That's on page 63. And still on sports here, Kenyan girls target Senegal's scalp. That's on page 60 in relation to volleyball. There's a lot more that you can read in the Daily Nation. Still, here on Media Watch, we have to touch on the Star. 500 Mungiki were killed to assist Kibaki. And here we have a beautiful image of Machakos County Governor Mutua launches Machakos First Lady. Here's a beautiful image of the two. MPs ask for 7.8 billion in mini budget. That's on page 6. All the above stories are on page 6. Facebook teens, Kenyan youth spending 2.2 billion on social media. This is a confirmation that we had here from a representative from Soko Directory, who indicated that the youth are now going to be at the forefront of spending in this country, and we need to tap into that and give them the right tools to ensure they can actually maximize on their financial capacity. Moving on from page 1 to page 16, there's a lot more that you can get on the county issue. Page 16, we are touching on the Rift Valley news. Nanok says Turkana deserves an oil refinery. And here we have the Turkana governor, Josephat Nanok, speaks in Eldoret town on Monday. Still on the particular page, NCPB buys 3 billion maize, eyes 30,000 extra bags. Wasingishu contractors warned against shoddy work. Baringo MCA fault PSB officers for hiring process. Sawmillers group locked out of KFS meeting. There's a lot more that you can touch on the Rift Valley News County, and there are other segments that you can get yourself informed on in the county breakdown here on the Nairobi Star. From page 16 to the back page of the Star, AFC turned to KCB. After exploits in Ethiopia, Leopards target bunkers. That's on football. You can catch the full story on the back page of the Star. Gritty Arsenal can pass Bayern test, declares Gunners Arsene Wenger. That's on page 42 on the Star. It's in the sports section. Ex-Oserian coach Ogutu surfaces at Kolongolo. That's an elaborate story of one of the ex-coaches of Oserian here in our Premier League in football. You can get the full story on the back page. Gabriel Selassie to be main pace setter at London Marathon. This is a very powerful illustration here, and we are hoping that even if he's going to be a pace setter, we are going to manage to beat him. He has been a thorn in the flesh of our athletics team, but of course we're going to do our best to actually catch up with him at this point. To the People newspaper, MPs launch anti-gay war. We've touched on that in the Star and also in the Daily Nation. House wants 7.8 billion more in mini budget. You can read more on this on page 6 of the People newspaper. President promises subsidized fertilizer. Farmers' joy on executive order as planting season nears. That's on page 5. And still touching on the opposition camp right here, Raila holds meeting of aspirants to claim to calm them down. Of course, this is an initiative by the opposition camp to sew in the rough edges that they have as a unit. And here we have a very beautiful image that illustrates peace, but of course we're going to be following up on this to ensure that what we see is actually what is. Moving on from the top page to page 5, you can get cheap fertilizer, assures Uhuru. That's an elaborate promise by the presidency to ensure that our farmers get what support they need to ensure that we have the right products and produce at the end of the harvest season. Farmers have a reason to smile after President Uhuru announced new subsidized fertilizer prices as the planting season nears. You can get the elaborate story on this on page 5. Atwoli tells Sosion over rival trade union. That's on the education segment. You can catch that on page 5. Also, UK told to reveal Kimathi grave. That's Dedan Kimathi's grave. And here we have protesters who are calling for his grave to be identified by the United Kingdom. You can read an update on this story on page 5. Moving on from page 5 to page 11. Police Commission urges Uhuru to fill vacant slots. NGO calls for tougher laws against homosexuals. We've touched on that in the previous dailies. Head teachers lobby defense fee increment. We've always touched on the education segment, and this is a step back to the promise that was said by the ministry that they would investigate to find out whether the levies are actually justified. Siaya project stalls after workers strike. Read all these stories on page 11 of the People newspaper. From page 11 to the back page, we're still touching on Arsene Wenger and the possible match, actually to the assured match between Arsenal and Bayern Munich on the back page of the People newspaper. Lungaha wants mistakes shed as Kenya tackles Senegal. That's on the women's volleyball team. That's expanded further on page 54. You can read more on this and other political stories, not to mention business and also agricultural initiatives that are being set up by the government here on the dailies. Catch one and get yourself informed. That's Media Watch for now. Join us shortly as we take a look at the leading stories in business with Cherotich Kenei.